Hey guys, this is Jim, WT1W, and you're watching FEP Labs Radio. Thanks for stopping by. So today we got a package to share, and this is going to end up being probably a two-part video because otherwise it would be a little long. What have I got? So it is not from DX Engineering. This is from my friend John Gendron, NJ4Z, November Juliet for Zulu. And this is the POTA array. Now, obviously, I've opened the box up and had everything out of the box. This is a prototype POTA antenna array kit. And let's go through the pieces and parts and talk basically about how this works. And then I'm going to share with you the things we need to set this bad boy up and how it's all going to work. So first thing in the box is we have the control unit. And the control unit is in a nice aluminum box. Let's scoot that back out of the way. The control unit is in a nice aluminum box. It has a power switch and 3 LEDs and a 3-positioned guitar switch, according to John, is what he called that, which seems about right. And on the back side, we have a control cable connection, which is an RJ11, and a 12-volt DC in. This thing runs on 12 volts nominal DC. So this would run on your power supply in the house or on a 12-volt LiFePO battery out in the field. This kit is made for field use. So this is the control unit to the array. This is part of the business end of the array. And this guy has these connections on it. So this is for our control line from the control box. This is where our antenna cable goes here from the radio. And then over here, we've got 4 connections, not 4 antennas. So we have element 1 and element 2, and this is for 2 discrete vertical antennas. I'm going to be using the 17-foot-ish stainless steel whips from Alpha Antenna. And then these 2 connectors are for a delay line. A delay line, what do we need a delay line for? Because this is going to create a phased array for us. Let's look at the rest of the bits and then I'll explain that a little better. So here is our control line, and this is a standard RJ11 style telephone cord, 4-conductor. I think it's a 6-pin connector, but it's only 4 conductors that are being used inside. This provides power to this unit and also the switching information to this unit. Then we have some string, a power lead, and some coax. So what this is all for is this. Obviously the power is for the control unit. And this looks like a standard, I haven't measured this, but this looks like a standard 5525 barrel connector. So if you have one already wired up to power poles, great, or you could wire it with, whatever kind of connectors you want, ring terminals, spade lugs, whatever. And that plugs into our control unit. The power is supplied to this end of the unit with the line that comes from the control box. John said 50 feet works fine, 100 feet might be problematic with this cable. This is like 26 gauge wire on this cable. So in talking to him about it on my show this morning, we discussed that you could probably change this cable out with some thicker wire, something like Cat5 network cable, which if you're like me, you have a box of it, and I don't use Cat5 for anything anymore. So it's thicker wire. It's like 22 or 24 gauge, maybe 20. I'm not really sure. And it would let you run this a little farther. You wouldn't have as much voltage drop as you do with this thinner cable. Your only problem would be getting an RJ11 connector onto it, or obviously rewiring the box, which is way outside the scope of what we're talking about. We have the string, and this is science string here, baby. So this is marked with John's information on it, and I don't know how well that's going to show up on the camera. I don't think it's going to want to focus on that, on the words. So this is a 20-meter kit that I got from John, and so the spacing between the 2 vertical arrays, vertical 1, vertical 2, is marked on this, and this is scientifically derived string for a spacing of 17 feet 4 inches, which is what it says on here. So this goes around your vertical elements when you're setting this up, and so they're the correct distance apart. John got this idea from T.O. Originally, John was, bless his heart, measuring it with measuring tape every time. This is great because it's done. I don't know how much stretch there is in this. This is paracord. You could use something like arborist line or some kind of fancy string if you wanted, but unless this thing stays out in the daylight in the weather, this is going to be fine for setting this up, and then you put it away because it doesn't need to stay out. Then we have our coax. So there are 3 hanks of coax here. This one is our first one, and what this is for, and it says it on here, again, I don't know how well that's going to actually show up on the camera. This is a 71-degree delay line cut for 14.175 megahertz. So that is where the bottom of our SWR dip should be when this is set up correctly, is right at 14.175. And this delay line is what allows us to do the phasing. So this goes between these 2 connectors. Now, you may be thinking, why have I got what is, I don't know, an 8-10 foot piece of cable when I'm connecting here and here? Because this is the delay between the phasing of the 2 antennas. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So this would go between those 2 connectors right there. These are coaxes cut for our vertical elements. And again, they're labeled. This is an 84-degree feed line on this one. And this is an 84-degree feed line on this one. And again, it's labeled and says it's for 14.175. Now, if you get the kit from John, and this kit is still a prototype, it's not available on his website yet. Production is coming out real soon. And John provided me this kit at no charge, but I will actually be buying this from John because I want this kit. When you set up a phased array, you have to account for the difference between the 2 vertical elements of the antenna. So obviously our antennas are going to be 17 feet 4 inches apart. And what that means is when you transmit, it takes the signal. If this is the first element of your antenna, and this is the second element of your antenna, and you key up at your radio, it takes the signal some amount of time to go from here all the way over to there, to that finger. And that is what the delay line provides, is that electrical delay. The reason we want to do that is because when we transmit RF, it is an AC signal, and that is a sine wave that's going like this. We want to add our 2 sine waves together. We want that signal to be stronger, and the way we do that is with that delay line, and that ensures that our sine waves are lined up together, because this antenna will take longer to get the signal. I mean, a few nanoseconds, right? That's what the cable is for, that delays it. So it slows down the signal from the first element so that it hits the second element at the same time that the second element is transmitting its signal, and then we get gain. Now, based on the way this works, what we have here with the box is, of course, a power switch. But you can see here, and I don't know if the camera's going to focus on that tiny print, we have a 3-position switch here. And this is for element 1 this way, element 2 that way, and labeled broadside this way. So in the example we were talking about, let's say these 2 soda bottle caps, these are from Diet Dr. Pepper, by the way, just in case you're wondering. These are our elements, our antenna elements sitting on the ground. When we have the switch flipped toward element 1, our signal is wanting to go that way. The lobe is this way. It's not all that way, but it's way more that way than it is this way. So it has 2 effects. The first effect is we get gain coming out of this way. John said, depending on 2.5 to 4 dB of gain when we're aimed in one of the end directions, and it doesn't matter which one, because what the switch does is flip around the position of the director and the reflector. So if we want to put most of our signal that way, then we flip the switch toward that element, and that's where the bulk of our signal goes. That is also where most of our signal comes from other stations. So that has the second effect of dropping any signals, or at least severely reducing the amount of signal we get off the backside. So this gives you front and back like a Yagi antenna would. But we're using two verticals, so very cool. If you flip it the other way, obviously our signal goes that way, and we receive mostly from that way, and we attenuate the signal on the backside. So that works either way. This is a 2-element array, so we have 3 options. The third option is broadside. So when we go broadside, the lobe, instead of wanting to go that way or that way, radiates out this way. And I don't remember if there was a specific gain figure, but it's a more even thing, and we kind of drop or input some attenuation on the end lobes. So if you have this set up, for example, east-west, which is probably about how I'll have it set up, and I change broadside, that means I'm going to favor north-south signals much more than I'm going to favor anything on the east or the west. And vice versa, if I want a western station, for example, if I'm trying to pick up something on the west coast or Hawaii, for example, I'm going to flip it to this element so that my signal is wanting to go this way, and I'm receiving more from this way and muting out or attenuating anything on the east side of the antenna setup. So that is Array 101, the super basic version using soda bottle caps. Normally, you have to pay extra for this kind of demonstration. So that is that setup. Now, what antennas are we going to use with this? I think I mentioned, and I'm not sure, I'm going to use the alpha antenna stainless steel whips. So let me go grab that stuff and let's take a quick look at that. Stick with me. So here is the mounting kit that I'm going to be using. Now, this is not the 17-foot whip. This is the 34-foot whip. The 17s are in the back of my truck, and I'm entirely too lazy to walk out there and get one. Trust me, it looks about the same except skinnier and lighter. All right. The key to this is you have to be able to mount this thing in the ground. The other thing I would tell you is, so the 17-foot whip from Alpha Antenna, and this is not a sponsored video, that's the one I bought. There's other 17-foot whips you could buy from Chameleon, and back in the day, MFJ sold them too. The 17-foot whip from Alpha Antenna, according to John Gendron, is exactly the right length. We don't have to do anything with it except fully extended, and Bob's your uncle. So what we do need for this is we need some ground stakes, and we need a way to mount this antenna body where we can put this whole thing in the ground. Now, you could use two 34-foot whips. You would have to adjust the length for 20 meters, which is the kit I got. And of course, that's based on our delay line length, right? So if I wanted to use this, I would have to get another one. I only have one of these. And according to Chuck, KK6USY, these will not really freestand very well. You really need to guy them, which means you need to buy or 3D print a guy ring on this thing to stabilize it on the 34-foot model. The 17-foot model will work perfectly fine standing up on its own. So what you need to do this, and I'll put links to this stuff in the video description below. Also a link to John's website, performancearrays.com, where he has the full power kit as well as other stuff, I believe, and that is where the POTA kit will show up when he's got it ready for production. So we need a couple of spikes to put in the ground, and these are CB truck driver mirror mounts, whatever you want to call them, from Amazon. And the way this is going to work, you can see it has a hole here for our connector, and what we're going to do is we are going to put this bad boy through the connector. An important pro tip, do not lose this washer, because you'll notice this washer has a slight lip around it, and that is to provide electrical isolation between the mount and the center conductor, which is the gold part here. So that goes in like so, and then that screws on that guy. how many guys does it take to screw in one antenna connector, right? That fastens on there like so. And that washer isolates our center conductor from the base. The whip screws in here, and it is the same size on the 34-foot whip as it is on the 17, standard 3/8-24. This piece, you'll unfasten, and you can see it's made to go this way, sideways, which won't work for us, but this is a square pattern. Undo the bolts, rotate that around, and then this mounts on one of our ground spikes, and we jam the whole thing in the ground, and there you go, Bob's your uncle. And according to everything I've seen, John has verified this, Chuck has verified this with the 17-foot whips, and getting that thing in the ground, it's not going to fall over. It is well self-supporting. So you need this hardware here, obviously, as well as whatever stainless steel whips that you're going to use. So that is our additional hardware kit. John sells these kits for a given frequency length, and that frequency is going to depend on the separation between the two vertical elements as well as the length of our delay line. And if you remember when I showed you the delay line, this is actually labeled and it has to be a certain length. Now John will sell you the kit with pre-cut from John connectors on the cable, or you can roll your own cable if you want to do that. But my understanding is there's a fair amount of math in this. If you're like me, you hate making cables. So I just had John do the cables and send them with. And of course, there's a cost difference. It'll be a little cheaper if you make your own cables, or if you have the right coax. This is UV resistant RG8X coax. The connectors look very solid, very nice. So this seems like a very well thought out and well put together kit. At this time, as of this prototype and as of pre-production, almost in production kit, this box requires you to manually switch and power on and power off. So in talking to John today on my show, my Sunday morning show, which gets referred to as Ham Church, we talked about setting this up with something like an ESP32 and using an app either on your phone or your computer to talk to the ESP over the network and have it switch for you. So you could potentially set this up completely remotely and not have to manually have this where you can touch it next to your radio. Because this, you're going to want to be able to control the directionality of this while you're using the radio. Now, if you're out in a park or portable ops, which is what this kit is designed for, this is going to be sitting by you anyway with your radio. You have 50 feet of cable, you know, it's going to be right there with you. I may end up setting this up and leaving it outside for some amount of time, which is not recommended and not supported by the manufacturer, note to self. However, I feel that if I stick this in a plastic Tupperware container with some desiccant beads, this thing is probably fine to sit outside for a while. Run all my cables through the side, seal it up with some goop, and I could leave it outside for some amount of time. So I may or may not put this up and down every time I use it, but it is not designed to stay outside permanently. Now, I mentioned the paracord. If this gets wet and dries out, the length is going to change a little bit, not tremendously, but it potentially could. But again, you're only using this when you set it up, because what you're going to do, let me scoot those out of the way. What you're going to do when you set this up, and I'll use the stakes for our demonstration, you're going to put your antenna mast through this, pull the cord out to the other end, set up your other antenna mast, so your distance between the two elements are correct. That's it. The only other thing that you'll need to have for this kit, obviously, is radials. John sent me an electronic copy of the documentation. I don't have it with me. He recommended using about 2.5 meter radials and having 4 or 5 bunches of 2.5 meter radials. Your mileage may vary. Radials are kind of a, what is the word I'm looking for? A point of contention in hams on how many you need. You do need radials. This is a vertical. It needs a counterpoise. You could try it with one radial. You could try it with multiples. I will probably do something like I did for my DX Commander Venture antenna and make 4 or 5 batches of 2-meter radials and go with that. It depends on what you want to do and how much you want to experiment with your radial setup. What John did recommend during setup is to set up one mast at a time, make sure the SWR looks good with your radial setup, and then get the other mast, set it up separately, and make sure that the SWR looks good on it. And again, the dip on this should be right around 14.175 is where you're looking for your minimal SWR. And your radial field will have some bearing on what kind of SWR you get. So you may need more radials. That is dependent on your ground type. Is it good, dirty, filthy, moist ground? Or is it dry, sandy, or clay? You know, it's just going to depend on what kind of dirt that you're plugging this into. John used his portable setup at the beach, in wet sand on the beach, and had great results with it. So again, you need radials. Your mileage may vary with how many you want. That's up to you to do how many radial setups you want. There is not a specific connector on here for radials. So what I will probably do for radials is make my radials with a ring connector and slide it in here and then tighten this down right there, and that's where my radials will go. The other thing you could do with radials with this guy, keep it in mind that this is going to be sitting like this, and this will be rotated 90 degrees, so it's up and down. You could also use something like an alligator clip and just clip on your radial leads onto these bolts that are sticking out. Because once this thing is set up correctly, you're never going to fool with this again. So that may be a way to do your radials. Either way will work. Your coaxes go in here. I don't know which way will work best, and that's probably something I'll tinker with, whether I'm going to fasten them here or just use like battery terminal alligator clips, Big Daddy alligator clips, and just snap them on and off. I feel I'll probably do that because then I can take the radial bundles off, coil them up, and put them all in a pack and keep them neat so I can stow them for later deployment. If I fasten them here, then you got to unscrew a bunch of stuff, and I don't know. We'll see how that works out. John is working on some other variations of this. I don't know how much it will change the kit. One of the variations is playing with elevated radials, tuned elevated radials. There's also some possibility for multi-banded kits. That is not something you're typically gonna have in a kit this small and this low price, but that's all stuff in the mix, and I have no idea about pricing information. I don't know the specific price of the POTA kit yet. And of course, the POTA kit, when I say the POTA kit, I mean this kit up here, not the antenna hardware and the mounting hardware. I believe this kit is going to be priced somewhere around $250 with antenna cables. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure of how he's got it priced yet because that information is not available. So you're looking at about $250 for this. I think the stainless steel 17-foot whips are about $50 to $70, somewhere in there. These things are about 10 or 15 maybe a piece. You need 2 of them, obviously. John is also working on expanding the kit to use 3 different radiating elements, which would give you finer granularity of where you're forcing that RF out of, right? Not just basically two cardinal directions, well, 3, 4 if you count broadside, but being able to aim all the RF or the bulk of it in multiple directions around the clock, which would be really cool. This kit is rated for 100 watts sideband and 50 watts digital. That is the official designation. I will probably be stress testing it a little more than that, but that is the official word on the POTA kit. So that is all we're going to have in this video. The next video, we're going to get this thing deployed out and set up and then take a look at it, both individual SWR on the antenna elements, and then we'll hook it to the flex where we can see on the screen and then play with adjusting which way the gain is and where the backside is and how that's all going to fall out when it's deployed. It does take this kit with radials and everything. John said somewhere between 45 and 50 feet of space, a clear spot. So keep that in mind if you've got some ideas about how and where you would use this. This is designed for POTA. So that's really what this is designed for. If you're in a tight space on your POTA, this may or may not be for you. If you have enough room to set up and you're allowed to stab things in the ground, this seems like a really good way to bump up the amount of contacts you can get during a POTA. In any case, guys, that's all I've got in this video. If you would, make sure you're subscribed. All that stuff is in the doodly-doo below. Ring the bell so you get notified whenever I post any new content. Thank you very much for watching. 73, y'all have a great day.